Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. President Trump claims a suspect linked to the Charlie Kirk shooting is being held in custody. Qatar's Prime Minister heads to the White House days after Israel's strike in Doha. And Prince Harry makes a surprise visit to Ukraine as he promises to do everything possible to help injured military personnel. Now, President Donald Trump says they have a suspect in custody over the murder of Charlie Kirk. It's thought that someone close to the suspect turned him into authorities. It comes as the FBI released a new video of the gunman leaving the scene where the 31-year-old right-winged influencer was shot during an appearance at Utah University. Here's what President Donald Trump has had to say.
High degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
A pastor was able to turn him in, or they got the family of the shooter to turn them in?
Well, it was a minister, and the minister went to a minister who was involved with law enforcement, by the way.
What's going to happen to this guy?
Well, I hope he's going to be found guilty, I would imagine, and I hope he gets the death penalty. What he did, Charlie Kirk was the finest person. He didn't deserve this.
Let's bring in former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI, Danny Coulson. Danny, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So we've just heard there from President Donald Trump. He's said someone close to the suspect turned him in. Does it sound like they've got the guy who did it? And could it be third time lucky?
No, I don't think it's lucky at all. It's great work. The FBI, the state of Utah, local law enforcement, the public, the family, all put it together. It's not luck. It's only luck that you stayed out as long as you did. This is what the FBI does. They're the best in the world at handling these kind of cases. This is what I did for a living. I did the Oklahoma bombing. This is what we do. And it's not luck. It's work. It's training. It's perseverance and determination. And so no, I'm very proud of the FBI. I wasn't real proud of them for the last few years because of some of the things they were doing, but I'm really proud of them now.
FBI Director Kash Patel told his followers on X that a suspect had been caught when, in fact, they were still at large. We are due to hear from Patel shortly. What happens now if police are sure he is the right person they are looking for in connection to the Charlie Kirk case?
A great question. First of all, they'll see if they'll be interviewed. In our country, you don't have to be interviewed. You can invoke and say you want a lawyer and stop the interview. But he may well talk about it. This guy is an inadequate personality, and he's a loser, and he wants to express his views, and he may well talk. What happens next is he'll be arraigned. He'll take it to a federal magistrate, or maybe a state magistrate, or maybe both, and they will bring charges against him, and then a federal indictment will ensue, and we'll take him to trial, and then we will convict him under our Constitution, and hopefully we will execute him under our Constitution.
So, Danny, it's really interesting you brought that up because in that clip we heard from Donald Trump, he says he hopes Charlie Kirk's killer does get the death penalty. Could this view be a little bit premature?
No, I mean, we can hope. I mean, we have a process, and we follow our process no matter what we personally think. We follow the process and the Constitution that governs our country and says how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to work. We'll go through that process. And I arrested Timothy McVeigh. He bombed Oklahoma, and he got the death penalty, and I was very glad for it.
And we're just getting some other lines through. The suspect in the Charlie Kirk shooting is a 22-year-old Utah man. That's according to the New York Post, which is reporting that. And it's citing law enforcement. Danny, do you believe this was a professional job? And could the suspect be part of a wider network, possibly, do you think?
No, ma'am. I think it's a one-man band. It wasn't professional at all. I think he missed the shot. He had a very average sporting rifle that has a magnifying scope on it, and it was an easy shot, and he almost missed that. And if he was a professional, we wouldn't know who he is. I was a sniper for the FBI, and I know snipers' tradecraft. I know how to do it. And if he was very good at it, we wouldn't have any idea who he is. He did a terrible job. It was like amateur night out. I was on TV last night with another FBI agent, and he made the comment, he made every mistake in the book. So he wasn't very professional. He was motivated to do it, but he was not very professional. And plus we caught him. How good can he be?
And we have seen footage of security personnel making certain hand gestures before Charlie Kirk was shot.
I saw that.
A lot of that has gone viral on social media. What can you tell me about this footage? And do you believe it shows that the sniper had been spotted? And if so, why didn't anyone respond? What's your take on this viral footage that's going around?
Okay, yeah, I do a lot of personal security work. I do presidents. I do presidents of our country and other countries. And you always place a security guy next to the subject. I'm sure the principal, in this case, Charlie Kirk. And he may have spotted somebody in the crowd that he was suspicious of. And I'm guessing here, but I think I'm right. He could very well have been sending signals to somebody in the crowd that there was a suspicious person, or he may have been signaling it's time to get out of here. I don't think there was any collusion. I don't think there was anything sinister going on. First of all, the shooter didn't need it. He had a vantage point. He could see Charlie. And it was something that would be completely unnecessary. I think it was just an administrative thing that they were doing. And it looks like baseball signals in my country, frankly. And that's the way I looked at it. And I don't think it's anything sinister at all.
And Danny, I just want to talk to you a little bit. We saw an attempted assassination on Donald Trump's life. Now we have seen the loss of Charlie Kirk. How concerning is this in America at the moment? And what should be done going forward?
It's terrifying. Remember, Donald Trump had 2 attempts. He had 2 attempts to kill him by sniper fire, and the Secret Service stopped it. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a psychologist, but I know that we need security on people like them, and the security needs to be very good. Security needs to be done close in and far out. I live in a violent country. It's very violent here. I'm concerned that when my wife goes to the grocery store or the gas station, I'm concerned about that, and we need to be vigilant. We have a saying in our country, the police are minutes away, but seconds matter. And those seconds depend on what you do. And it's kind of up to us right now. Remember, we had an invasion of millions of illegal aliens here, and that's another problem we have. We're dealing with that. I hope you guys never do. And so it's kind of on us to be careful, be secure in our homes. And when we go to shop or when we go to school, we need to think about the dangers we face.
And Danny, one final question to you. President Donald Trump's security now, will we see that be stepped up?
Well, I think it has been stepped up a lot. After 2 attempts on his life where he frankly had inadequate security, and they did a terrible job, only by the grace of the fact that the shooter was inept. Is he alive today? He missed a shot, and we're going to be, thank God for that. I think it's stepped up quite a bit. I think they have a new leadership at the Secret Service department. I'm a big fan of the Secret Service. I think they're the best in the world. My business partner for many years was a Secret Service agent, and I think they're really good. But they have to have resources, they have to have training, and they have to have commitment.
Danny Coulson, former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI in Texas, thank you for your time and your insights. Now, Qatar's Prime Minister is visiting the White House today, just days after Israel's strikes on Hamas officials in Doha drew global condemnation. Sheikh Mohammed bin Al Thani will speak with President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and other senior U.S. officials, with talks expected to focus on Gaza and regional tensions. The visit comes as Washington balances its alliance with both Israel and Qatar, a key mediator in ceasefire efforts. I'm now joined by Dr. Elie Al-Hindy, chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates. Dr. Elie, thank you so much for joining us. So the US is an ally of both Qatar and Israel. How vital is today's meeting for smoothing over relations after Israel's attack on Doha just on Tuesday earlier this week?
It is a very important and very crucial meeting to mend what's been broken between the two countries. We have to remember the background of Qatar, and Qatar being not only a mediator and a neutral country in certain conflicts, but also an advanced ally of the US to communicate and to deal and to negotiate with different entities, including the Taliban, including Hamas currently, and many others under the table and in public. So Qatar has played a very, very active role in supporting US interests and US policies in the region. And now, once again, we see Netanyahu creating a lot of trouble, not for the US only, but for President Trump specifically, by hitting one of their key interests and one of their key allies in the region. So I think there's a lot of embarrassment in the situation. Regardless if the US had given a green light or not, there's certainly a certain embarrassment and something that has been broken that needs to be mended.
And let's just pick up a little bit more on that, Dr. Elie, because in an interview with CNN, Qatar's Prime Minister said Israel's attack in Doha was state terror and killed any hope for hostages remaining in Gaza. Qatar says it's preparing a regional response. What could this regional response look like?
I think the whole region is now, like the rest of the world, potentially fed up with Netanyahu and his careless actions and his continuous opening of new conflicts without any vision of the day after, without any political aims of these wars, simply fighting on so many fronts. I think the region altogether, but the Gulf more specifically, will move together to a clear stand on what's happening in Gaza, on the Palestinian issue altogether, and on the position from Netanyahu. If I want to imagine what kind of response would this be, I can definitely see that the Abrahamic Accords will be on the table. The relations with Israel on the broader sense will be on the table, and definitely the issue of the two-state solution on the table, much more than specific details about the Gaza conflict and the hostages. There's certainly direct damage on the negotiations of Gaza, but I think there's a lot more damage on Israel's relations with the region altogether. All what has been built for so many years, for maybe a decade, in the works, now is being destroyed by Netanyahu's recklessness.
And Dr. Elie, Qatar has a large military base, and the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund invests a lot of money in the US. Can the country now trust the US to protect it following what we saw happening on Tuesday?
I do believe that both countries need each other. They are strategic partners, and I don't think there will be a big separation in that sense, neither in investments, nor in the strategic alliance, nor in the presence of the American base in Qatar. I think this can be amended, and this is why the meeting came very quickly and at that high of a level. Not envoys, not ministers, but the two heads of the states meeting within few days. There will be amends with the US. However, where the region altogether is going, kind of stability, what kind of vision for the future of the region, I think there will be a lot of change in that, and there will be a lot of review of the relationship that have already been established with Israel. But I don't think there's a threat that the US or Qatar will completely separate and switch the strategic alliance to somebody else or cut it completely.
And Dr. Elie, we're just getting some lines through actually on the newswire, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Israel and Britain from Saturday, the statement says, and Rubio will discuss fighting anti-Israel actions, including unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. And also, he will reaffirm US commitment to Israeli security. Are we surprised that Rubio is going to the region?
Not at all. I think, again, this is part of fixing the situation. But again, this attempt of putting the two things in a balance, like presenting whatever the European countries are doing, or Saudi Arabia is preparing for the General Assembly to recognize the state of Israel, putting that in the same balance as Israel attacking friendly countries, mediating countries, these cannot go hand in hand. These are not equal actions. Neither Britain, nor France, nor any of the US allies, nor even Saudi Arabia, when they are speaking about the two-state solution, when they are speaking about the necessity to create a state called Palestine with the minimum of sovereignty and dignity for its people, they are not saying Israel has not the right to exist. They are not being anti-Semitic. They are not being anti-Israel in general. They are being realistic in saying this is the only way out of the situation. So definitely the US will try to balance, but I don't think that there is equality in the two issues. Israel needs to stop its reckless aggressions, as we called them, and be more serious about peace process, more serious about the day after discussions, and more realistic in its way of dealing with the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people who are under its control, be it in the West Bank or Gaza.
Dr. Elie Al-Hindy, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights, as always. We can now join our correspondent, Blake Sifton, in Tel Aviv. Blake, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you heard my last question there to Dr. Elie, but we do know Marco Rubio is to travel to Israel in a show of support on Saturday. Do we know anything more about the upcoming visit?
Pardon me, no, that's a new development. We don't have any more information on that, but it is fitting with this diplomatic push to meet with both Qatari officials and Israeli officials, and in all likelihood to see that an attack like this doesn't happen again and strain relations between two key American allies.
And Blake, Qatar has accused Israel of trying to thwart ceasefire efforts, but has pledged to continue its role as a mediator ahead of the talks. How crucial is this right now?
It's incredibly crucial, of course, as the Israeli offensive to seize and occupy all of Gaza City intensifies and seemingly nears. The clock does appear to be ticking to reach a deal, to reach a ceasefire and hostage deal to stave that attack off. And of course, Qatar, along with Egypt, have been essential to the entire ceasefire and hostage release process throughout the 23 months of this war. They've hosted Israeli delegations, including the heads of the Shin Bet, head of Mossad, military leaders. They've hosted round after round of talks. More than 130 Israeli hostages were freed because of the direct involvement of Qatar in the two previous ceasefire deals that were reached. So their role is essential, but even with them agreeing to continue to fill this role, it's unclear what the likelihood for a ceasefire is. We have to remember that the Hamas negotiating team was attacked and bombed while they were discussing President Trump's ceasefire proposal. And we've heard from Hamas, of course, that the leadership has all survived, but we haven't heard information on whether any are injured, whether they're incapacitated, whether they're willing or able to negotiate going forward, or perhaps whether they're willing to meet in a group again, risk meeting in a group to discuss any ceasefire proposals. Now, certainly the family members of the hostages here in Israel, they think that the chances of a ceasefire have become very slim after this attack. The mother of one of the young men held captive in Gaza said that in deciding to strike Hamas in Qatar, Netanyahu was essentially deciding to kill her son, she said.
And also, Blake, what message does this send to Benjamin Netanyahu from both Trump and Qatar now that we see they are meeting?
Well, the Qatari Prime Minister meeting with Rubio and President Trump so soon after this attack is certainly an attempt by the United States to reassure Qatar and to reaffirm their appreciation for them. And I think this visit also seeks to tell Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu really to think twice before considering something like this again. There are reports that in recent weeks, when the Israeli military and Netanyahu had threatened to strike Hamas leaders anywhere around the world, they said that there are reports that both the Mossad as well as the U.S. administration had reassured and promised Qatar that would not happen. They would not be struck by Israel. And in the days since that attack, Israeli officials, the ambassador to the UN, as well as Netanyahu, have both threatened to do it again. They've said that Qatar needs to expel Hamas and they need to bring them to justice, or Israel will. So Qatar will certainly be looking for a guarantee from Trump that will not happen again. Of course, the United States is a major ally of Qatar. Central Command is based there. A major air base is based there. And the United States is Qatar's main security guarantor, and much of their foreign policy has been based on feeling protected by the presence of the American military, and that has seemingly been, if not shattered, rattled. So they will be looking for guarantees from the United States that this will not happen again.
And the UAE has summoned Israel's deputy ambassador in a formal rebuke of the attack on Qatar. This is a very rare and strong sign of condemnation.
That's right. Of course, we have to remember that not long ago, the UAE, along with Saudi Arabia and other countries, were a part of the blockade of Qatar. Their relations were not good. They, of course, have mended since then, but the UAE is also a member of the Abraham Accords, of essentially a peace deal with Israel in 2020, only 5 years ago. So to be calling Israel's actions in this way is certainly a large development. And of course, immediately after the attack, the leader of the UAE went to Qatar to reaffirm his solidarity with the nation. And we heard, of course, the UAE Foreign Ministry put out a statement saying any aggression against a GCC member constitutes an attack on the collective Gulf security framework. So really, Gulf states here are reaffirming their solidarity with Qatar after this attack.
And Blake, while we talk about this right now and the diplomacy, we cannot forget that strikes are continuing on the Gaza Strip. And today, according to local health authorities, there have been more attacks.
Well, that's right. As we're all focused on the attack in Qatar, of course, the war in Gaza and especially the Israeli offensive in Gaza City is grinding on. Just today, local health officials in Gaza say 50 more people were killed, mostly in Gaza City, including 14 members of the same family who were killed in an airstrike in Gaza City. Just last week, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that the gates of hell were opening in Gaza City. The Israeli military began intensifying their attacks on a near daily basis. They are now ordering the evacuation of high-rise buildings and then destroying them, leaving thousands and thousands of people homeless. And of course, they are reiterating their demands and their calls for the civilian population of Gaza to evacuate to the south. The population of Gaza City is some 1 million people. The latest figures the Israeli government gives for how many people have left is 200,000, so still a substantial portion of the population remains. And there are reports that the Israeli military estimates that some 200,000 people will remain in Gaza City, even if this offensive goes ahead. When I've spoken to contacts in Gaza City, you hear that many people want to leave. However, they're often too sick or injured, or their family members are to leave, or they simply can't afford it. The United Nations has said that it can cost $1,000 for people to be relocated from Gaza City to the south. Of course, that's prohibitively expensive for many people in Gaza City. And we have to remember as well that the United Nations has said that Gaza City is the epicenter of the famine gripping much of Gaza. So if this offensive goes ahead, that situation is likely to get much, much worse.
Blake Sifton in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just update you on our top story today. And the suspect in the Charlie Kirk shooting has been named as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. He is from Utah, and it's believed his father turned him into authorities. So that is an update we're getting on the Charlie Kirk shooting. Tyler Robinson is the name of the suspect. More on that story throughout the show. Now, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The UK is issuing a new round of Russian-linked sanctions. It would target ships carrying Russian oil, as well as companies and individuals supplying electronics, chemicals and explosives used in Russian weapons. The latest package is in response to the recent Russian attacks and coincides with the British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper's first visit to Kyiv. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to over 27 years in prison. That's after a panel of Supreme Court justices convicted the former leader for plotting a military coup. Bolsonaro's lawyers are calling the sentence absurdly excessive and are expected to appeal. The opposition party leader in Turkey faces a critical court decision on Monday. It will decide whether Özgür Özel can continue to serve as the head of Republican People's Party. The case is part of a year-long crackdown on the party over corruption allegations. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is feeling the pressure after deploying Peter Mandelson to Washington. Starmer fired the UK ambassador to the United States over his link to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Some Labour MPs are criticising Starmer for appointing Mandelson in the very first place. Over the past 2 weeks and months, President Trump has repeatedly attacked the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, for not cutting interest rates. The president's intention is to make borrowing cheaper for Americans and for the federal government. But some warn the strategy could have unintended and very unwelcome consequences. Carina Kamel explains.
President Donald Trump's unprecedented attacks on the Federal Reserve aim to pressure the bank into cutting interest rates. But according to economists, this could actually backfire, resulting in higher borrowing costs. In order to understand why, we need to look first at the yields on the 10-year Treasury bond. Those yields are set by traders in real time, and the Federal Reserve, for all its power, can't control yields because they're set by the market forces of supply and demand. And it's these yields that determine the cost of borrowing for millions of Americans, from mortgages to business loans to the federal debt. And here's the key point. Despite expectations that the Fed will cut interest rates, those yields are stubbornly high. One reason are the trade tariffs, which could lead to higher inflation, and elevated yields reflect that concern.
There is a feeling that manufacturers, importers will absorb a lot of the cost of those tariffs, but they can only do that to a certain extent.
Another reason for higher yields is the U.S. deficit, which stands at around $2 trillion. To fund it, the government will need to issue a lot more treasuries.
If you have the lack of demand versus the amount of supply, then that's going to reduce the price of that debt and therefore force up the yield as yields move inversely to the price of the debt or the bonds that are being issued.
Tax cuts are also a factor. While intended to stimulate the economy, they could also push inflation higher, keeping those yields up. Add into the mix the fear that the Fed could lose its credibility if it gives into the pressure and cuts rate too fast, and you end up in a situation where investors fear the Fed has lost control of inflation, pushing long-term rates even higher.
If you have a Federal Reserve that is doing the bidding of the Treasury, the US Treasury, and particularly the Donald Trump White House, who have made it expressly clear that they want much lower interest rates, then you're in a situation where the central bank is not acting necessarily to fulfill its mandate of price stability and full employment. It's simply doing the bidding of the White House.
And I think the perceived, let's call it perceived independence of the Federal Reserve is so important for markets around the world. And once you start chipping away at that, and once you sort of have this feeling that President Trump is doing all he can to push his favoured people on as governors, then I think people and investors are right to be concerned about it.
A number of different scenarios point to higher borrowing costs even if the Fed cuts rates. That's the opposite of what Donald Trump wants to achieve. And in the meantime, investors around the world watch and wait for the next chapter in the battle between the presidency and the Federal Reserve. Carina Kamel, Arabiya English, London.
Prince Harry has made a surprise visit to Ukraine after being invited by the Ukrainian government. The Duke of Sussex travelled to Kyiv with a team from his Invictus Games Foundation and will help military personnel who have been seriously injured in the war with Russia. For more on this, I'm joined in the studio by presenter Elena Wallace, and I want to say thank you so much for joining us. This was such an unexpected moment. No one was really expecting it. What more do we know about Prince Harry's trip to Ukraine?
Of course. Well, hi, Leigh-Ann. It's great to be in the studio with you. Yes, what a surprise visit it was from Prince Harry. Just amazing. Of course, he's going to be in Ukraine over the next day or so. And he arrived this morning by train. Now, of course, he's with his Invictus Game Foundation team. He's going to be doing all that he can to help the recovery of thousands of the military who've been affected in the war. And he's also got a meeting at the National Museum, we know later, where there's going to be around 200 veterans there who he'll be meeting with and he'll be spending time with as well. He's also got a meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. So I think just his presence is really going to be a glimmer of hope to so many in Ukraine over the next day, you know.
And of course we know because of the Invictus Games, this is a massive part of what Prince Harry loves to do when it comes to charity work. The Prince also spoke to journalists while en route to Kyiv. What did he say about how the trip actually came to be?
Of course, yeah. So when he was speaking with the press on the train, he said, we cannot stop the war, but what we can do is do everything we can to help the recovery process. Now, of course, I know that Prince Harry in the past 2 years hasn't had the best press in the world, you know. Many are on the fence with him. But I think what we can say and what we do know about Prince Harry is his heart is tremendous. And I feel a lot of people look to him like a massive part of hope, like, you know, very much his mother as well. So I think he is doing that all he can with this situation. But how this all came about initially, this is his second visit to Ukraine this year. Earlier in the year, he had a chance meeting with Olga Rudnieva, who is the founder and the CEO of the Superhumans Trauma Center in Ukraine. They had a chance visit and he said to her, look, what can I do to help you? And she said, the best way you can help Harry is to come to Ukraine. And that's what he did. But like any good husband, he had to ask his wife first. and indeed the British government, and then they gave him the go-ahead, and that's when the official invite came there.
And you know, it's so interesting because we say Prince Harry hasn't had the best press, but we love to see him when he's doing what he's best at, like his mum, and he does charity work, and he's very compassionate, and he was, of course, in the British Army, so it's something very close to his heart. He also spoke about how important helping injured soldiers is to him, a cause we know that he loves to discuss. And what more did we hear from him about this?
Of course, so the Invictus Games was founded in 2014, and back in 2017, that was the first time Ukraine took part in it. And then 2 years ago, he said that a lot of the veterans from Ukraine were actually pulled from the battlefield, took part in the Invictus Games, and then they went back to the battlefield. So in that moment, you can just imagine like the amount of love and the amount of respect and connection that those veterans who were pulled from the battlefield had with the other veterans who were taking part in the games and indeed the competitions as well. And I think Prince Harry probably has does have, a really special place in his heart and a lot of respect for those veterans, especially from the Ukraine battlefields.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But, I actually think that Prince Harry's had quite a lot of positive press in the last week, because we also saw him in the UK and he went to Clarence House. Everyone was also surprised by that. And, of course, he met his father, King Charles. Do you think that we could see Harry coming back to his roots slowly? Does he want to make amends? Is he missing home, maybe?
Well, as someone from the UK, personally, I would love to see this. This is the first time that Harry has seen his father since February 2024. So that's like 19 months. He hasn't seen his dad for. I think this is a really, really positive step. I mean, the meeting was obviously private, but what we do know is that it was a private tea between just his father and him. It lasted 55 minutes, so they found room in both their schedules to make this meet happen. And let's see, I guess time will tell if this is the beginning of reconciliation, if this is the beginning of a new steps forward to making their relationship better again,
And I guess his father, the king, has been very unwell, but also I've read a lot about the fact that the rift between him and his brother William stays remarkably large. But, a father and a son does have a different bond compared to a sibling, so maybe it would be a good thing for both of them to come together at a difficult time.
Of course. I mean, you would love to see it, wouldn't you? Of course, as well, with Harry's beautiful children. King Charles hasn't seen them in such a long time now, so it would be amazing if that could happen as well. But of course, with his brother, his brother was in Cardiff when he was in the UK, so he wasn't able to see him at this time. But I guess time will tell, and let's just hope that friendship can, relationship can be better with all of them.
And like we did say, a really positive week, I'd say, for Prince Harry, because it hasn't always been that way in the last few years.
To say the least.
To say the least. Thank you so much, Elena Wallace there, joining us to talk about Prince Harry's trip to Ukraine. Let's take a look at the top business news now. More than 20 Australian critical minerals firms are heading to the US in hopes of becoming key suppliers to the West. This comes as Washington proposes nearly $1 billion in funding to speed up the development of US critical materials used in battery and defense industries. Last month, Australia granted over $80 million to metal producer Nigestar to build 2 smelters from the Western markets. Now, the will of late fashion designer Giorgio Armani instructs heirs to sell a 15% stake in the fashion house within 18 months. It also says another 30 to 54% can be listed or transferred to the buyer within 5 years after his death. Armani has advised that Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy and also L'Oreal should be a priority. Turning to all the sports news now, and tensions flared at the final press event for Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford's super fight in Las Vegas, but not between the boxers. UFC chief Dana White stole the spotlight, clashing with a reporter over his Saudi-backed move into boxing. Still, Canelo and Crawford promised fans history in the making when they do meet on Saturday night. Now, more than 1.5 million ticket applications from fans have been received by FIFA within 24 hours of the pre-sale draw for next year's World Cup. The global demand for the tournament came primarily from countries such as the US, Mexico, Canada and Argentina. The FIFA World Cup will be hosted next year in June. I just want to bring you another update on our top story today. And President Donald Trump has announced that police have a suspect in custody in the Charlie Kirk shooting. Media reports have named him as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. A reminder of our top stories. Qatar's Prime Minister heads to the White House days after Israel's strike in Doha. And Prince Harry makes a surprise visit to Ukraine as he promises to do everything possible to help injured military personnel. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. The Rail Deal with Tom Burgess-Watson will be coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in just a couple of hours' time with the best of W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.